Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, the impact of living an inspired life. Following is a story of drive. It's one of those stories of someone who turned their life around, but the story is not about them. It's about you. I mean, it's about me too. My intent is that it gives us ideas and inspiration and alters our perceptions that help us consider our own capacity and motive. And when I say capacity, it's not a capacity to do more. Everybody hears it that way, I think, these days. Most of us need to do less, I believe, but do more of what matters to us. So my guest is world record mountain climber, entrepreneur, mama of 7, Jenn Drummond. In 2018, she had a car wreck that should have ended her life, but it didn't. It did, however, as you can imagine, change her paradigm on life. How often does that happen? Her epiphany from that was you don't get to choose when you leave this life, but you sure can choose how you live it. So really strengthened by this awareness, she set out to live a more authentic and adventurous life that fit her. And she was inspired to climb a mountain for her birthday. So her son raised the stakes by suggesting, hey, how about Mount Everest? Well, she accepted that. During her training for that climb, her coach upped the ante and proposed that she go for a Guinness World Record and become the first woman to climb what's called the 7-second summits. The pursuit matched her desire to live this full, significant life, not just successful, but significant life. Well, today, Jenn is a world record holder who elevates others to master their own summit in life. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Jenn is host of the Seek Your Next Summit podcast, which I'll be on pretty soon here. And she's focused on inspiring others to go beyond, again, success and really look at what is significant to you. This goes to the heart of my message on drive. What drives you authentically? Her new book and my muse for the conversation that those of you watching the video can see over my shoulder here is called Break Proof: 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals. Hey, when I'm not having these conversations about human potential, I am working with people on their human potential. And to Jenn's point here, to often find and pursue something that is significant to them, not just successful in the world's eyes. So if you want to talk on that, you can find me at kevinmiller.co. Here are a few sponsors. They help make the show possible. Then drive with Jenn Drummond and myself as we consider the impact of living an inspired life. You can hear the impact that it's had on her children. And I share some of what I've done that's impacted my 9 children. Let's see what we can learn for ourselves today.
Jenn, reading your book and the stories and the events, I mean, as an athlete, I resonated a lot. And yet there's some extent of it that I think, I don't think I've gone that far. So I got to say I was impressed. How's that?
Oh, well, I like it. I'm glad you liked it.
You start off with the story of a car wreck. It's really, I've been interested lately. I have had this, feels like this rash of people, and interestingly, all women who have these significant times of life with a car wreck.
Yeah.
They got me looking at it. I actually have a client and with her, and just thinking that it's more than just damage to a car or maybe even damage to the physical body. It's like this. I'm wondering, and I'm going to ask you because I've thought about it, and I thought I'll wait and ask you since it came up again. That does it seem like it's almost more of a mental, or as much at least of a mental, like a violation? It's just such a violent thing that it's more than just the sum of the broken car and broken body.
Yeah. I mean, my car accident happened for me, not to me. And
Okay.
I can say that with zero hesitation whatsoever, because I was in this stage of my life where I was surviving, not thriving. And I just didn't know how to get out of that pattern. It's interesting. I used to live in Michigan. I moved to Park City. My first semester in Park City was my favorite part of my life that I could remember. Mm-hmm. And it's because I moved in January. And when you move in January to a new place, they've already picked all the room moms and the soccer coaches and all those things in a community. So I moved to this community and I was committed to nothing. And so every day I had to fill my day with things I wanted to do because there wasn't really any obligation set up. But by the fall of 2016, I was already back into my own routine, right? Coaching teams, running this, organizing that, doing that, like got rid of all my free time. And I just remember thinking, how did I get this ingrained into a community this fast?
Yeah.
And then fast forward a couple of years, I was running a holiday party, Thanksgiving in particular, for one of the classrooms. And this other Pinterest mom came into the classroom. And I say this because I love her and I'm so grateful there's Pinterest moms out there. I'm not one of them. And this cute little mom shows up with a turkey sweater, a turkey hair clip, and turkey socks, and has an extra set for me. And she's all excited. She's like, look, we can wear matching outfits in the classroom today. And I remember going into the bathroom to change, thinking, this is my life. Like, this is my, like, I am wearing turkey gear right now. Like,
That's a movie scene right there. It's a holiday movie scene. Yeah.
I mean, I was fighting back tears. And I told myself, when my kids get to college, I can get back to me. But right now, this is just the season I'm in. Suck it up, buttercup, and make the best of it. And about a month later, that car accident happened.
Wow.
And that car accident was a wake-up call to me saying, you don't know when this time is up. You only have today. And if you want to keep postponing yourself for some unknown future date that you think it's going to all of a sudden arrive and you're going to be able to start doing life differently, you're in for an awakening. And for me, that car accident gave me permission to lean into who I was and do my other roles. So it really opened that and card up for me.
So tell me how that looked like. I, like you, have more than a couple kids. Yeah. And it is, I mean, actually, that doesn't matter. Even if you have one kid, I mean, the valiant thing is to be the everything parent and to do all the stuff. And I have my own story of, I was going to say deviating. That's such a bad word, but of backing off that and doing some things for myself. And it was significant to detach my identity and to question those things that you think of. No, you're the parent. You got to do this for the kid.
Right.
So what did that look like to then, I don't know what the level is that you went back and you weren't the everything mom?
I wasn't trying to be the everything to everyone. And I actually had a conversation with my kids and I said, hey, listen, mom has been doing mom stuff at the expense of herself. And I realized that I'm not the happiest version of me or the most excited version of me. And I'm not showing up the way that I want to show up. So I'm going to make some changes. And when people make changes, like everybody's affected. And I'm just letting you know, I'm figuring it out. So if things change here and they feel uncomfortable for you or you have questions, talk to me about it because I'm trying to figure it out too. And the thing that held me accountable was I had twin daughters at the bottom. And my therapist asked me at the time, which I hired a therapist because this was such a life-altering event. I needed somebody to help process. She's like, would you want your daughters to have your life right now? Would you want your daughters to do what you're doing every day? And she goes, why don't you start pretending that you're one of your daughters and ask yourself, would I want my daughter to be doing this? And that just changed the game for me entirely.
Wow. I was hit with that with my best friend, business partner, Randy. He's in one of the offices next to me here. And he hit me, I don't know how many years ago, Jen. And he said, I was relating some anxious issue with work and whatever. And he says, so is this what you want to show your kids that being an entrepreneur is? Right. This harried, hair on fire, super anxious. I mean, you can get stuff done, but it's just, does that seem attractive? Now he said it so kindly. I don't know, but in my head, I said it to myself.
Right.
Like, this is stupid. Yeah. What a terrible model was right. I showing them. And that started the evolution of me, I guess, but from that. But I mean, how did it go then with your kids? Did you say, okay, before I was involved in, 100% of this stuff. Now I'm going to do 50% or 30%. And how did it flesh out with the kids? Did you see some of that and go, yeah, there's pros and cons, or did you realize, and I'm I'm fishing here because I realized there was so much that I was doing that didn't amount to a whole lot, honestly. So
Yeah.
what was your experience?
No, I think in our head, we always make it a bigger monster than what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden, and I have 7 kids. So my kids knew that I wasn't attending every activity of everything
Mm-hmm.
just because there was overlap of games and this, that, and the other thing. But I was very conscientious on a weekly basis, looking at my calendar, making sure, am I spreading time amongst everybody? And how does that look on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and a quarterly basis, which was kind of my check-ins. And then it was also, hey, mom's going to go do this thing. She's going to be gone this weekend. I know I have never been gone more than 5 days before, but everybody's going to be good. And I'll call on Zoom and, all the little things that you can do nowadays that keep you connected.
Yeah.
And so it was a progression. And to be honest with you, 2019 was a year of us learning. And then 2020 happened and there I was homeschooling and everybody was home full time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, if we had any shock, it all got removed because we were all together 24/7.
How old's your oldest kid?
Now I just turned 18. So I now
Just
have an
turned
18-year-old.
With all that you've done now, so you went from being, super mom to, still super mom, but, also this, this mountain climber and doing all this stuff. So again, I'm fishing because of my own experience. It was quite a while ago, but I had not been involved. I'd quit cycling, quit racing, and hadn't done anything much for a while. Outside of just my own exercise and fun, but no competitions. And I ended up doing this duathlon down in Colorado Springs. It was an off-road one. And I thought, I just kind of on a whim, I thought I'll jump in it. And I took the whole family and I found myself feeling guilty. Like here it is, a Saturday morning. I got them up earlier than they would have wanted to go. And they're coming down here to watch me. And I just felt kind of like, egotistical dad or kind of, I was feeling kind of bad about it. So I do the thing, I do the race. We have this great video of my youngest, my little guy. He was like 3 or 4 years old running alongside me as I finished and stuff. And later on it unfolded and the kids and throughout time, they've shared that was so inspiring to them to see me doing something that inspired me. And I thought, here I am feeling guilty about doing something for myself. And the testimony from my kids is, oh my gosh, it was so great seeing you do that. They never testified that, hey, thanks for, doing the laundry or cleaning the dishes or whatever. But I go do a duathlon and I thought, wow, tell me your experience with that, with your kids seeing mom doing this stuff.
Yeah. So my perfect story along this line is Mount Everest. When my son challenged me to climb Mount Everest and kind of a fighting match between the two of us and who does hard things, that evolved into, okay, fine, I'm going to climb Everest and show you whatever Everest is we're capable of summiting. My biggest fear of climbing Everest wasn't climbing Everest. It was being away from my kids for that long. And I'm like, oh, I can't climb Everest. The good mom doesn't go climb Everest. Like, that's crazy. I just didn't have a paradigm for it to fit in that felt good. And so I talked to a doctor in town. I live in Park City, so we have altitude doctors around. And I'm like, I can't be gone for 8 weeks. Like that's a no-go for me for sure. And he's like, okay, well, let's talk to this company called Hypoxico that makes these tents that allows you to acclimate at home, which will cut your expedition down dramatically. So I got a hold of this company called Hypoxico, and they're like, yes, we think you should be able to go like door to door in 3 weeks, maybe 2. Wow. I'm like, okay, well, I can do that. Like there's people that go away for 2 weeks or whatever and figure that whole piece out. So I order this tent, I sleep in it, blah, 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 blah. I'm still worried. So I have everything lined up like a parent would, right? Like my mom's out here. We have babysitters, we have extra sitters, we have drivers, like everything's lined up if I'm gone. And then my final step was going to the kids' school. And I went to the kids' school and I just told the teachers, like, hey, I'm going to go climb Everest. I've never been away from home this long. Can you offer my kids a little bit of extra grace? Here's what's going on. I just want you guys to know behind the scenes if they're acting up at school. And one of the teachers goes to me, she's like, this is incredible. Would you be willing to come in to talk to the kids at school about setting Everest-like goals?
Wow.
And could we turn this into a curriculum type thing? I'm like, oh my gosh, 100%. So I went into the school, I talked to the different classrooms, they colored little hikers, they put their Everest goal on there, like make the Black Diamond ski team or, go on this travel soccer team or go visit grandma, whatever their thing was. And they decorated the whole school with these little guys. And then in the front of the school, we made a big Mount Everest. And then we made a little hiker. That was me. And I had a tracking device on me. So then the school could track me every day where I was
So
going and
cool.
the kids could move me. And so then I'm like, so I'm going, I go over to Everest. I'm sad and like boo-hooing and, like I miss my kids and blah, 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 blah. But we have Wi-Fi at base camp. So I could Zoom call into the classrooms and answer questions that the kids had while I was climbing. And so I'm Zoom calling in, I'm talking to my kids, I'm talking to the other kids, where did you poop? What did you eat? Like all the kid type questions. I summit, I come home, and my kids are ecstatic that I'm home. And it was one of those things where the story that I made up that I'd be a bad mom or my kids would suffer, or how dare I do this, couldn't have been farther from the truth.
Yeah.
My kids got to experience what it was like to be supported by other people. They got excited because other people were excited, like, look where your mom is, or look what's going on, or blah, 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 blah. When I came back, I talked to the classrooms about my experience there and shared photos. And I became known as like the mom that climbed Everest. And kids would come home after school and they're like, I want to climb Everest someday. And my daughter would be like, well, my mom will take us. Don't worry. And it was just this awesome gift that if I wouldn't allow myself to get out of the way of my first story about it, we would have never had that experience.
I'm sitting here thinking about my own parents, Jen, and thinking about, of course it matters to be supported, as a kid. And I think about all the things they did, though I still wonder if, the emotional support is probably what matters more than what they did otherwise. But the things I remember about them are the things that they did. My dad was a consummate entrepreneur, always doing something he was interested in. And I'm so grateful that I got to witness him being inspired. And maybe that, just living an inspired life. And to do that for our kids, because I want people to hear that, because so many people struggle with the perspective that doing things for yourself, especially as a parent, doing things for yourself is a luxury. It's this, if you can afford it, if it doesn't bother the kids or whatnot. And yet to think about our experiences with our own kids and to see them. Now, obviously somebody knows someone who devoted all their life to their work specifically and ignored their kids and did that. And so that's the polarized over there. But over here, we have a lot of people doing nothing but being kid centric. So where in the middle is good for everyone? I don't know. But again, my own testimony with my parents and then thinking about mine or my kids and theirs is, they want to see us alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun, right? Like I remember training and I'm like, I don't want to train today. Just like you don't want to do your math homework or I don't want to eat healthy, but my body needs me to eat healthy. So I have energy to be able to do this training plan. And I have to do the training because that's what gets me home alive. And so we got to do life in parallel at some level because the things I was doing were so visual for them to be able to latch onto. And they would see, like, every single time I left the back door, I would run up a flight of stairs and run back down because that would just add a little bit of steps, right? Every single time I went to a soccer game, I brought a 12-inch step and a backpack full of water bottles. And I was the mom that was training at the end of the field while the game was going on so that I could do both things. So they learned, like, hey, when you do big goals, like life changes. But it doesn't mean it's bad. It just looks different. If friends wanted to go out with me, we'd go for hikes. We wouldn't go sit around and eat lunch.
I like that too, because it wasn't nonstop. Fair. I mean, you're training, you're full on, you're doing that, for so long, you do the event and then you've got a break. And then the next time you're the mom sitting in a chair watching their soccer game and you're not training like mad. They get to see the beginning and the end. It's not just a nonstop thing. It's a goal. You work for it, you achieve it. And then you have kind of like seasons. Fair.
Yeah. Fair. 100%.
I appreciate that even letting them see that. And that's not the full on, hey, I lost my family because I did this every day for my entire life. Mm-hmm. Now go to break proof. So I was interested when I first saw this with you, Jen, because I've been playing with a friend. I'm doing a project with a therapist. And we've been looking at the concept of resilience. That's such a big word in the past, I don't know, since Brene Brown, I guess, which I dig. So I'm not dissing resilience, but we've been looking at, and you have this word in your book as well, adaptable, that if my goal is to be adaptable, I was thinking about mountain biking, which I do a lot of now. And you train to be adaptable because the point is that things are going to be different around every corner. The terrain's going to be different, the path. And I'm training so that I can handle whatever comes up. And in that, hopefully I don't fall and have to be resilient and get back up. So we were kind of playing with that, being adaptable so that we don't need to be resilient because we're not going to fall and have to get back up. Break proof kind of gave me that thought. If you are break proof, and as part of your book, you talk about adaptability. If you are break proof, then there's not as much need for resilience. I'm playing with that. What do you think?
Yeah, so the title came about because we either take breaks proactively or something breaks and then we have to like explore what happened, right? So for me, in the break is the proof of what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do now that we have this information to continue on our quest or possibly pivot if there's a new direction that we need to go. So that's why it's called break proof. In the break, there's the proof of what you need to do to be able to continue on your pursuit. Because as long as we're alive, I think we should be growing and expanding and continuing into different pursuits. So for me, resilience is such, like, the word takes resilience, right? Like it's like almost, there's so much resistance or there's so much energy charged into it. And when we take that apart and just realize life is an experiment, it's meant to be explored and experienced and learned from. And when you look at it like that and everything's just data points to be able to continue on, we're naturally resilient. I mean, if you look as adults, I'm amazed at how much resilience there's around us all the time. When you're a little kid and you're driving down the road, you're like, oh, cute store or nice hotel or whatever else like that. When you're an adult and you realize all the effort that had to go into that hotel being that way or that store being placed there or that park being maintained and celebrated and continued the way that it is, like our life is resilience.
The looking at, you brought me back to goals as well. And this concept that I think we still struggle with. I think it was Churchill. Is he the never quit, never, ever, 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 ever quit?
Yeah.
And I think he's given that. And you talk multiple times as I went through the chapters about changing strategies. You're committed to the end goal. You're going to, let's use Everest as your example. Well, I don't know if this is fair. One of your mountains, that you're going to get to the top. So you start off and you go and the weather's crap and you turn back. You didn't make it today. So you'll come back. And now this path is not working out. And so you go back and you try another path. You're committed to the goal, but not to that one, in essence, methodology, not that one strategy. It may not be working. And I found that, or at least I was reading it into it repetitively in the book. And it's just always such a good reminder for me. And I think for all of us, as we look at goals, I mean, we're about to hit the beginning of the year and people are going to set goals and never quit. Well, but how many different ways can you get there? You may need to quit the first one you try.
Yeah, definitely. So when we did Mount Logan, which took 2 attempts for me, our first attempt, we had 3 guides, we had a camera person, and there was 4 clients, right? 3 guides, 4 clients, 7 of us, which took 3 tents because you had 2 sleeping tents and then 1 dining tent so everybody could eat together and blah, 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 blah. It was our first attempt up there, was freezing cold weather. Everything was against us, super hard. Finally, Parks Canada called us off the mountain and said, listen, it's too cold. You're not going to be able to melt snow. You're going to risk your lives. We're pulling everybody off the mountain. You'll have to come back next year. And we're like, okay, well, I guess we're done. And so when we were done, we started looking at everything and we were like, okay, what did we learn? And we learned that we don't want 3 tents because every tent that we set up, we had to build an igloo around because we were so exposed. It was so windy. And so if you didn't build an igloo, the tent would rip and the tent would be worth nothing and you need a tent to survive out there. So when we went back that second time, we're like, okay, guess what? We're going with 3 people. 3 people can sleep in 1 tent, can eat in 1 tent. We have 1 igloo to build. We have blah, 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 blah. We're going to go later in the season. We don't think the crevasses are going to open up that early. We're going to go, there's just so much beta that we got from the first attempt that allowed our second attempt to be enjoyable, allowed it to be fun. We had success. And if we didn't have that failed first experience, I don't think our second experience would have been as good as it was.
Take that into a business or work example of something that, I imagine you, like me and like so many entrepreneurs, I mean, you did things in the past and you set your course and you put all the investment into it and it doesn't work out. And you laid out so much effort to do that. I have found myself going after things so radically differently than I used to. I'm still as committed, but such a different methodology. So take that into, the business concept.
Yeah. So I remember building this business and financial services, and we landed a credit union as a client. And so we built a contract around that relationship and what we thought would work well for us. And so our goal was to land a few more credit unions. And so we were pushing hard on that. I wish we would have waited to land a few more credit unions, because what happened was we repeated a contract that we didn't have work through all the bugs, right? Like we just didn't know how it would play out because we didn't have the experience. So we were guessing on what we thought would happen. And that's not necessarily what unfolded. So now all of a sudden I have this contract that's repeated 8 times. Yeah. That if I would have had 12 months under my belt on one contract to say, hey, guess what? This is what's working. This is what isn't. It's a lot easier to go into a new relationship with a contract fresh than being in a relationship and say, hey, guess what? We're going to need to shift this a little bit because here's something we didn't think about. So I know like everybody wants this overnight success and to grow. That one example has given me permission to say, you know what? We're going to let this season a little bit, see what we learn. And then we're going to go after something and try to go hard because we have a little more experience under our belt and we know how to write the contract better.
That has been, to have something now and go, here's something. I have 2 projects right now that I just have to see happen. They're things that I want to exist in the culture. I want them both to exist. So I've laid out kind of, here's the concept and here's a framework, but specifically how are they going to happen? I don't know. I don't know. And I'm going to go get help. I'm going to go, which is one of your chapters. I'm going to go get help from people that in certain areas are a lot more experienced, a lot smarter than I am, but I'm committed to the end goal. But now the effort is we'll try this and that won't work. And we'll try this. And along the way, it brings up the term failure. Will they be failures? I don't know. They're just ways that didn't work out.
Right.
It doesn't feel all right. Your chapters, I went through everything, I really appreciate the reflection questions. And I just pulled out, Jen, the things that stuck out to me that were of interest because we'd have a 5-hour show otherwise.
Yeah.
Chapter 1, cast your vision wider and deeper. One of the first things that you had on there that I kind of chuckled with, and you said, home is the ultimate goal. Here's the goal for you, the mountain or the business thing or whatever, but coming back home intact and having a home intact is the ultimate goal. And it was funny because somebody mentioned, I don't know, base jumping or something recently. And I said, dude, I have a lot of dependence. A long time ago, I left that. If the risk of error is death, I'm really questioning it because I really do want to be home. But to take that to whatever we're doing, back to that thing of what is the big goal and giving our life to it and losing everything else. I mean, that's an elementary concept, but we still see it every day. And probably the ends of the spectrum, people who gave themselves so fully to something that they did lose relationship, didn't have a home to come home to, or those who just devoted to home and totally ignored themselves and they didn't have a them to come home to. I hadn't thought about that. Fair? Mm-hmm. Either way, tell me about the coming home and how that impacts. It's pretty tangible with the mountain climbing, but even with your work, even with business.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and this happens to all of us, so I was working full time and then I hired myself out of a job because I believed, because of the society I grew up in, that being a stay-at-home mom was the ultimate victory, right? Like you are so lucky if this is what you get to do and blah, 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 blah. So here I, follow the rules and do all the things. And I put myself in a position to be a stay-at-home mom, which was rewarding it's definitely rewarding. It's just probably not the best alignment for my personality for the long haul. Once everybody got to school, was like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I do? Like, how do I avail? It didn't fill me like I thought it was going to. And I love that it fills other people. And so it was one of those things where when you're on the mountain, and here's like with business, I guess, like I love my kids. I love raising them. My oldest is 18. I still don't know if I've done a good job, right? Like the feedback is such a long loop on raising children, where the feedback in business is quite rapid. So it gets addicting because you're like, okay, this is working. And then I can do this, and this is working, and this is working. And so I like feedback. I love progress. I'm a sucker for it. And so things that have those natural loops in them or have progress that's easy to identify, I can get sucked into those projects really easily and then lose sight of things like being a great mom at the expense of that, because I just don't have the feedback loop set up that way. So for me, it's like, okay, I need to constantly check in, or what are my values? What do I want to be known for? And are those in every category? And I had to make those rules and those boundaries and those like feedback loops, because not everything gives them to you all the time.
Yeah.
So that it allows me to stay grounded in what's important, but still pursue things that get me excited.
I interest myself with the feedback on the kids. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you there. My oldest, let's see, you've got one 18. I think my oldest is 28. And I look at them, and even the things where I think they're doing really good and I want to take credit. If somebody asks me, so how did you foster that? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it's just, we model what we model. I mean, coming back to that they see us and they watch our lives, and that impacts them so much more than all these things that I endeavored to do. Now, again, not to minimize bedtime stories and on all the great things that you do, but I question myself. I would do things. Well, I have enough kids. I got to do things different with some of the younger ones and the older ones. As the older ones told me, Dad, we didn't like that. Okay. Fair.
Thanks for the feedback. Yeah. So I think what we measure is easy to keep track of, and just making sure you're measuring things in categories that are important to you.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep pulling things out that stuck out to me, Jen. You said, this is still in chapter 1, that so you've achieved the goal. And well, you know what? Let me deviate. One of the things that's hit me in recent times, I don't know how long, a couple of years, is that we go after these goals, and that the next day, what happens? We're looking for the next one. Nothing is an end. It's all the journey that we're going on. Actually, I think I had Arthur Brooks on the show and Robert Waldinger, are both really focused on happiness, and some of the things that they said of focusing on the journey got me looking at that it's all just a journey. And when you go climb this mountain or start this business or do this thing, it's an exit. It's a scenic overlook, or it's a pit stop for resources or whatever. But the next day we're going to keep going. And it really helped me not minimize the goal, but to hold it a little more lightly. And then to also look at what is the real payoff of the goal. So that brings me to my point, because you said, as you descend in this sense, or as you come back from the goal, you carry a new wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if I've really given that enough gravity through time, that, okay, I did that thing, and I still have tended to look at it as the sum of whatever it was, and not to go, yeah, I did that in the effort to train for it, to get there, to make it. I'm a different person. I should have more wisdom and a different perspective. I think that what hit me is realizing that I probably haven't done that as well over time as I could have.
Yeah, I get that. For me, the big aha moment happened when I climbed Mount Everest.
Okay.
So I remember being on the top of Mount Everest for 10 minutes. We were on Everest for 10 minutes, and then we had to get down because the weather was so bad and things were closing in and blah, 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 blah. And so as I turned around and started hiking down, I was like, oh my gosh, like I trained 1,238 hours for 10 minutes on the top of this mountain.
Yeah.
Right. And so that whole walk down was just this epiphany that you hear it's the journey, it's the journey, it's the journey. It's not the destination. It's not the destination. But when you live it in that black and white of a picture, you're like, man, I am so glad I enjoyed the training, or I celebrated along the way, and I remember little pieces of it, whatever. But that coming home on that trip just reminded me that when you're setting this goal of whatever it is, you better make sure you're enjoying the process and who you're becoming and what you're doing and who you're impacting, because 99% of your time is in the pursuit of it, not the achievement of it.
Yeah. Go with that. I've been playing lately with, is the it even as satisfying, fulfilling, and enjoyable as just the leading up to it? Is the training, it is the looking forward to it, that's really probably where I have the most joy. The actual doing of the it is great, but then it's over. And it's also interesting. Now you live in Park City, you live up at some altitude. My house is at 9,200 feet, and right around here we have Pikes Peak off in the distance, but right around here there's not really anything higher. So we've got some cool stuff up here, but I spend most of my time playing down. I'll even go down to Colorado Springs, and the fun trails are the things coming up. Like at the top, there's just not as much happening. All the fun is, it's an analogy, but it's literal out here.
No. And like, if you think about it from the mountain, nothing lives on the mountaintop.
True. Totally.
Right? All life is up below the summit. And the reality is like your goal, all of it happens below the summit. The summit is just this moment in time that you touch and you go back.
It's funny you say that, because we literally have, my office is right here. It's at 8,500 feet. My house is over the ridge. There is so much more, for the most part, wildlife down here. The mountain lions are down here. I've never seen one. The bears are always getting into people's trash. We see like one a year, maybe, up there. You're right. Things don't hang out up at the top. It's more exposed. It's so funny you say that, because at the end, I mean, we do 14ers around here, and you spend all day going up, you get at the top and eat a sandwich and look around, and then you go down and you're just as much looking forward to dinner down in Breckenridge or wherever you're going to. And so how do you take that though? Because I've been kind of playing with this a lot lately, and my listeners have heard stuff like this. And it's not that I want to minimize the goal. I mean, the goal is great. Without the goal, what the hell do you get off the couch for?
Right.
But how do you in your own mind, just kind of reconcile that it's, to some degree, I almost feel like things are a little anticlimactic. Just prepare for that. And back to what you said. So really freaking enjoy the process.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I remember like those last few steps, and I'm like, okay, this pursuit's done, right? This world record that in the beginning, I was like, okay, let's sign up for it, see what happens. At least if we fail, we're like signing up for something big. So people kind of are expecting us to fail. So whatever. And there's a huge level of disappointment. They're like, wow, we did it. Like, it's done. It's over. Like, in that fast. I hadn't slept in a tent before. I expected it to be harder or crazier or whatever. And by all means, there was crazy hard and all the different things, but it's just funny. There is a letdown for sure once you achieve the thing. But, I was talking to my kids, because everybody always asks, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I'm like, that's the easy thing. For me, finding something else to get excited about and do it, that's easy. Learning how to sit in the what is and not be pursuing anything, and allowing this season of winter to just be intentional and decide what I want it to look like before I commit to something else. That's a harder zone for me to be in, but that's a zone that's just as important so that I can experience the summer and have the energy to do it. We're not always in summer. And so this is my winter season. And even though it's not my favorite season, it's still an important season to live through.
It reminds me, I already mentioned him, Arthur Brooks. His book, Strength to Strength, was very impacting to me. That was the first show we had him on. And let's see, I just turned 54. And I am as driven as ever. I mean, I have things that I want to do, but in a different way. Yeah. I'm not as, essentially, even on the big epic adventures, I've done so much where I proved that I can suffer to near death, and now I'm not as motivated to try to prove that part. We did this last year. We did the Suffer Fest. It was 40 miles on the Grand Tetons, in a day, and see how fast you could do it. So we did 40 miles. And we're going along, and it was midway, and there's these guys. I don't even know how they got up there. They had these folding chairs up there, and they're sitting by this high mountain lake. having a cup of whatever steaming beverage, and we're just hoofing it by because we're trying to, get a good time. And I'm thinking, I think I'd rather sit with them. I mean, this is cool. This is cool. And I'm great that, I literally have the t-shirt and all the paraphernalia from doing this thing, and it's cool. And I'm still going to do things like that, but I'm also realizing that, maybe my drive is also, as you kind of said, just to sit and be and enjoy it and take it in sometimes.
Well, especially like for my personality, one of my kids got into scuba diving, and I'm so grateful he got into scuba diving because for me, a lot of my sports are how fast can you get from here to there? Or can you get this done so you can get home to do the next thing or whatever? And when you go scuba diving, they drop you off in the water and then you have to swim to the boat, and there's no point in getting there the fastest. Right? It's whoever gets to see the most critters or the most fish or the most whatever. And so your objective is different. Like, how do I get the depth of this experience instead of like the speed of this experience? And just that experience of scuba diving and having that story in my brain, when I'm doing things, I'm like, okay, wait. My autopilot is like, let's go. Can I slow that down a little bit? And what more can I see or observe or experience before I get to the finish line?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, Rick Hansen has the book Hardwiring Happiness. And he talks in essence about, the negative things that happen in our life leave a big impact. So it's emotional. It hits us. We don't do that as deep, have those deep feelings for the good things. And he's saying to hardwire happiness, stick in it. Try to let it impact you just as much, which actually, that's one of the points that I brought out of chapter 1. I think it was like point number 9 was celebrate. And I thought that's one that I miss a lot. You get there, you bag the summit or the business thing or whatever, and that's cool. And I almost wonder if it's a little egotistical aspect of it. Like, it's not a big deal that I've done and I've not celebrated it. And I haven't, to Rick Hansen, I haven't hardwired it in. I haven't taken the time to really celebrate. Have you always done that well? Or is that something that's grown in you?
No. So you know what? Funny thing is mountain biking taught me that, because here's the thing. When you mountain bike, going tighter and harder is not going to help you at all, right? Especially as we're trying to adapt around the corner to we don't know what is. If you're loose on your bike, you're able to absorb things and respond easier. And so, but that doesn't mean you don't have these nerves that build up, right? When there's these harder sections that I'm not used to passing because I get bounced off by a rock or whatever else like it is. For me, my coach pulled me aside. He's like, Jenn, like you need to train your body that when these nerves show up, that it's a good thing, that it's okay, that you don't have to like lock and load and push harder and try harder and close your eyes and hold your breath and all the things we do. He's like, see if you can breathe through it, see if you can relax through it. And when you do get through that section, get off and like do your dance and celebrate and have fun and train your body to metabolize those emotions into something positive that you can utilize going forward. And so for me, whenever I get those feelings, I'm like, okay, these feelings aren't wrong. They're not bad. What's another way that I can soften into them? And how can I integrate them into my being to use them for future pursuits? So when we were climbing on Everest, you had those ladders that, cover the crevasses. I trained on those at home a little bit over a swimming pool. When you're in real life and they're over a 2,000-foot drop, and when you step on one side, the other side goes up in the air because, humans put them together. There's no OSHA checking to make sure things are safe. It is nerve-wracking, and your body is feeling it, right? Like your heart's racing. You have to swallow your heart. You have to breathe deep. You have to talk yourself through it. And when I got to the other side, we celebrated and had so much fun with it. And the person before me would have been like, no big deal. We did it. Like, I don't want to make a scene out of this. Like, let's just keep going and trudging on. And then after I learned that lesson of celebrating and having fun or whatever, it's like, okay, both experiences happened. Both experiences are true. Yeah. One's a lot more enjoyable than the other. Let's lean towards what's enjoyable and repeat that as often as possible.
I think again about holding lightly. It's such a term for me. I need to get that tattoo of holding things lightly. Mountain biking. So I was a pro on the road. So mountain biking came after, and I used to get kind of an arthritic feeling in my hands from, I think, gripping. And now I can't even explain. It sounds goofy, but I mean, you got to hold on, but I hold lightly. I haven't had that arthritic feeling in so long. And I mean, come back to, again, we can apply it to anything, business or family or whatnot. I continue to come back to that, Jen, of going, you talk about your personality style. Mine's to hold on tight and to force it.
Yeah.
And to hold it lightly and enjoy it. These are the tattoos that I need to get. I keep saying I will, and I haven't.
No, my coach once made me run with potato chips in my hand. She's like, don't crunch the potato chips.
You mentioned that. That's so funny. That is so funny. I literally run and I'll find myself and I try to run open-handed.
Yeah.
I think I probably look like a goof, but yeah, for that same reason. All right. Chapter 2, fully commit or don't climb the mountain. You know what? I actually want to play with that because that's literally the title. So chapter 2 is fully commit or don't climb the mountain. And then we've got chapter 6, recognize when it isn't your mountain. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed pulling those together. So let's play with that. So fully commit or don't climb the mountain. Well, actually play with that with me because that's one of the first things I saw. Because I thought, okay, you got to have your head on straight to hold both of those together. It's almost, would it be fair to say, attention, fully commit or don't climb the mountain and recognize when it isn't your mountain. Play with that with me.
Yeah. Okay. So I have 2 distinct memories in my life that these are my speed dial stories for both of these. When I graduated from college, I took a job in finance. My parents warned me. They're like, you're graduating early. I don't know if this is a great idea. Why don't you just finish your last year of school and then find a career? I'm like, no. This company hired me. I'm taking this job, blah, 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 blah. My parents are like, okay, fine. You graduate early and you take this job. You're staying at that job for a year no matter what to prove to people that you're not this young blonde that just jumps jobs. I'm like, of course I'm going to stay there for a year. Duh. Like, why are we even worried about this? So I show up for this job and I get into the office early. The lady shows me around the office. She's like, here's the offices, here's the lunchroom, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, and here's where you're going to be sitting. I'm like, well, this is the call center room. And I was actually hired to be a financial advisor, so I don't think this is right. And she goes, sweetheart, how do you think a financial advisor gets their clients? And I was like, what? So my first 2 weeks on this job was smiling and dialing for hours upon hours. And I would leave every single day sobbing. I had never heard the word no before. Like, I can't believe this is going on. This is not a financial advisor. This is like the worst job ever. I got hung up on all the time. So much so that I actually called the school that I graduated early from. And I said, I'm kidding. I don't want to graduate. I want to go back to school, stay another year. And the school's like, honey, semester's already started. You might be able to come in at like halfway through the year, but you've already graduated. This really isn't an option for you. Well, calling my parents was not an option. Like, there was no way I was going to quit. So I went to the store. I bought a calendar, circled 365 days. And at that point, I'm like, okay, listen, I'm here for a year. I can make it horrible or I can try to make the best of it. And that's up to me. And because I committed to that year, my energy was no longer trying to figure out how to get out of this commitment. My energy was used to how to make this commitment work for me, or what can I learn and maximize from it. And because of that, I had a great year. I made more money than my parents did combined my first year out of college because I used all my energy to make it work versus negotiate and how to get out of it. So if you're going to commit to something and you truly commit to it, it changes your energy and what you focus on.
Okay, in that, and I'm going to circle back a little bit to where we started. One of your subchapters, work smart, not just hard. Okay. Pithy statement. We've all heard it.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of things, the common sense that's not common to me that I don't do. And even looking at that, you've got enough kids that at some point you can't do it all. You've got to figure out how to. I think waiting tables was one of the best things that I had for being a parent, because you learn to take care. You don't just go and take care of that table and go back and that table and go back. You kind of, conglomerate those suckers. And that was really good, but I still find myself, I think what jumped out at me when I read it again, Jen, was that find myself just getting caught in the busyness and the hard work and thinking that I'm accomplishing something at the end of the day, wondering, I don't know if I did. And then the other day where I realized, oh my gosh, I've kind of been playing all day. I just did one 20-minute call, and it was $100,000 call.
Yeah.
And coming back to that, work smart, not just hard. If we were forced to do that, and having somebody call us out, I think there's room for all of us to do. It's one of those statements that we don't really apply well. You think?
No. And for me, right, like I hated cold calling. So, I mean, if I could get out of cold calling, I would. But if I got out of cold calling, then I wouldn't have clients come in the door.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, everybody, when you book them on the phone, they want to come in at 5:30 at night. I'm like, no, you can't come in at 5:30 at night, because if I call from 5:30 to 7:30 at night, I'm going to have way more results than if I call from like noon to 5. Yeah. Because people just weren't home. So for me, it was like I blocked that 5:30 to 7:30 time like it was my life, because guess what it was? Yeah. And so if somebody wanted to meet with me, they had to come in earlier, because I wasn't willing to give up that time, because that time just would equate to way too much other time being wasted to get the same results. And with cold calling, it's very clear and concrete. Other parts of our lives, maybe not so much. But when we have one of those examples of like, no, I know this works and I need to protect this, it allows you to use that story in other ways in different areas.
I said this before, that I found myself kind of coming back to some of the points in your book. I read a book, I don't know how many years ago, and I read a review. It's probably somebody I had on the show, and they had this negative review about how repetitive the book was. And I thought at the time that it needs to be. If the book is all these new things, you're not going to get it. And I come from having worked with Zig Ziglar, and the dude, in a 30-minute speech would repeat things over and over and over because we needed that. So I made sure in my book that I was repeating things. In your book, I don't know how many times you repeated it, but maybe I repeated it to myself. I came back to is placing people over goals. That is one that was really, I missed it a lot because I didn't think that I was doing that. If you said, are you putting people first? Yeah, it's the people out here that we're serving. But what about the people that you're working with and yourself? No, we're just tools is what you could see, obviously. And I burnt myself. I burnt the relationships of people that I was with for what I thought, we're serving the people out here. But I think I lost sight continually of the people and then just ended up looking at the goal. So you have that. Again, I read it multiple times. What is it that brought you to emphasizing that point so much?
I need to emphasize it, or it's something that I won't live, right? So a lot of times I think we write books for ourselves because it's like, okay, here's what I need, here's what I need, here's what I need. The people over peaks concept is tested all the time in the mountains and all the time when you're building a business. It's that cost benefit. Do I have people work Christmas Eve or do I give it off? And are we winning because they have it off and they're more recharged? Or am I losing because I lose that 8 hours of somebody putting time in to meet with people and do things? And when you're on the mountain, okay, is everybody feeling good and ready to go up? Did something happen to somebody? If the mountain is always going to be there, if the business will always be there, am I putting people first? Yeah. And the mountain is always there. So it was a constant check-in for myself, because who we are as people, I think, is way more important than anything we ever achieve. And I want to show up as somebody I'm proud of. And people are like, you know what? She achieved great things, but she was people focused. Yeah. And you have to check yourself on that topic a lot, especially if you have a personality like mine that likes to just go hard, get it done, and check the box.
I mentioned before we started recording that my dad died about a year ago.
Yeah.
Dan Miller wrote the book, 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love, real well-known guy. And the outpouring, I hadn't really thought about it till now, Jen, the outpouring of testimony to him. I don't know if anybody said, I love him because he achieved X.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that. I mean, that was neat. And obviously, maybe why they knew him is because through something that he did, but it was who he was to them. It was an encounter just with them. Again, what he did. I mean, you look at the breadth of what you're able to participate in and people you're able to connect with because of climbing the mountains and doing the things. But at the end, is anybody going to testify that what you did mattered to them. It's going to be who you were. Again, it's these things that I don't spend the time to think about. That's why we do these shows.
That's why we do these shows. Yeah. No, my mom just lost a friend of 50 years to cancer. And when we were at the funeral, no one was like, oh, she was a great tennis player and this, right? Like none of that mattered. And it was just one of those eye-opening experiences again of, man, who we are is so much more important than anything we achieve, even though achieving feels good. If we could have some of these celebrations of life before the end, I think it would help this whole story for a lot of people.
Let's play with it a second, Jen, though, because with that, we could real easily, you feel my angst. I feel like we're such a polarized culture right now.
Really
Our
are,
mindsets are so polarized. It's everything or nothing. And on this, because what we just talked about, we could say, okay, so you did all these summits. It doesn't matter. What matters is who you are to people. And so over here, somebody who's not going to do anything, in essence, no achievements, no whatever, and just be over here. But the goals, those destinations, like we talked about, they do matter. It's why you're sitting here. I'm connecting with you. This message is going to go out to, all these people and whatnot because of what you did. It has value. How could we, I want some brilliant statement. We need to create one if you don't have one, but it's what we do gives us more opportunity usually to be who we are for other people in a greater capacity. It gives us, there is something to be said for achievements and credibility.
Yeah. And I think it's important to show, to do things, right? I think we're here to push boundaries and edges and expand and do things that are significant.
Agreed.
But in that pursuit of those things, it's equally important to not lose the why, right? So when I went to Kenya to go climb Mount Kenya, and that is a culture that's not as equal as we are in the United States. And so for me being there, one, honoring where their culture is, but then also planting a seed of, hey, look what women are capable of. Hey, look what we can do and still do these other things that allows them to expand their definition of what is acceptable. So I think it's super important to chase these big, hard things, but to realize we're being watched, especially for doing big, hard things. And what are people taking away from our journey?
Mm-hmm. How you engage with it, kind of back to that modeling.
Yeah.
You said it earlier, we better be enjoying the process because we may not make it to the end. And regardless, I like that. It is true, especially with a lot of kids, but overall we're being watched. Yeah. And to think of that and take gravity with it. Your reflection questions, I may have enjoyed as much as anything. And one you had on chapter 2 was you have a setback. What can you learn? That is one I have made myself go back to setbacks in the past to figure out what I learned, or really to question, did I learn anything? Because I should have. As opposed to, I was generally just pissed that it got in my way. Again, back to you climbing mountains. I was a pro cyclist, and a setback is a flat tire. It's just nothing but pisses me off. It's just keeping me from the goal. And I took that, I think, into life and business and whatnot, as opposed to looking and going, okay, that didn't work. What can I learn? I probably looked at it as what should I learn, but what can I learn? And I think I'm better now, but I think I've missed so many opportunities to learn and give it value, as opposed to just being pissed off that it was a setback. And that seems to be what culturally, I think that's kind of normal.
Oh yeah. I can go back on phone calls of deals that didn't land, right? And just be so angry and want to place blame or this, that, and the other thing. But now that I'm further from those points, I can see how those pivots or those setbacks or those, data points of failure actually pointed us in a different direction or kept us with bandwidth to be able to handle a different opportunity or different things like that. But in the moment, some of them took years to be able to be okay with and process and see how that pivot actually worked out for us. But that's part of looking at those moments and excavating them and not allowing them to be these bitter things that we hold on to forever, and teaching ourselves that, hey, all of this happens for us, not to us. It's our job to excavate that and find that power and where it pushed us and where it's leading us to next. But that doesn't mean it shows up right away.
Yeah, I have not been a great model with that. Even driving, my kids will get pissed if I miss something and we have to backtrack, miss an exit and backtrack. On the backtrack, we're going to do 150 because now I'm making up for lost time. They're like, holy, we're going to die. But I'm just irritated. And I wonder how many times, I missed the possibility to, hey, there's something to learn here. It's not just lost time. Okay, well, on that, the thing that I found myself pondering in chapter 3, you said as point number 2 was just prepare emotionally. My listeners know I spend a lot of time here. We have, actually, I don't know if it just published or if it's coming up, a show on emotional intelligence with Patrick Kilcar. He's a professor down in Texas. And looking at emotional intelligence and looking at these goals, I find myself trying to do this more, not only, I guess it's preparing emotionally, but kind of looking and going, what is the emotion I'm hoping for? So I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. At the end of the day, there's an emotion that I want. It's not just to chalk it off the list. It's not just for the view. Gosh, that reminds me, what is his name? Is it David Weinmeyer? He's blind. He has the organization, and he went and did it, and he's blind. He didn't see the view. He got up there for his 10 minutes, didn't see a thing, but he got up there to experience it. There's still an emotion. And I've been trying to find ways to look at that, whether it's a business endeavor, a relationship, an athletic event, that what is the emotion that I'm hoping for? What I realize is I often have no idea. I don't know. I'm just doing it. But to look at that, so play with that with me as you say, prepare emotionally. Of course, the title of chapter 3 is Embrace the Power of Imperfect Starts.
Yeah, right. So that chapter is about all my luggage being lost in Russia. And I had curated this gear where I ordered 20 pairs of gloves, sent 19 pairs back because I had the one pair that gave me dexterity and warmth. And so that was like that for all the gear on this climb. And I show up to this climb and everything's missing. And I am so frustrated because I've been flying for 30 some hours, like the overhead's going on in the airport. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And there was a part of me that wanted to stop. And the guy looked at me, he's like, hey, listen, the window's now. So we either go rent gear and climb this mountain and see what happens, or you might as well go home because we can't wait. And I'm like, maybe I should just go home. There's been a lot of defeat. I landed in Amsterdam. I wasn't allowed to enter Russia from Amsterdam because it was a repatriation flight only. How I got booked on that is beyond me. So then there's just setback after setback after setback. And sometimes you're just like, maybe we need a timeout. I need to come home and go back another day. And thankfully the overhead went on and I'm like, I cannot listen to the overhead one more time in an airport for 1 more hour. I'm going to blow somebody's brains out. It'll probably be mine. So we left and we went to go get rental gear. And I started to control what I could. I'm like, okay, can we stop and get a drink of something? Can I reset and just take some breaths and get outside and just redo things? And we did that. And this climb had everything go wrong, right? Everything go wrong. And we summited. Like, I have no clue. Like, they still don't know how we summited because 1 in 6 teams summit because of the weather on this thing and all these other pieces. And we summited and we got back to the airport and my luggage met me there. I flew home and 6 months later, Russia closed. Wow. Because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And I would still not be able to go over there and climb at this rate. And I sit there and think, man, I am so grateful that I allowed it to be messy and dirty and ugly and uncomfortable and all the things that were not what I envisioned it to be, because it got done. And guess what? Sometimes no one asks you like what it was like. They just did you get it done? We got it done. We got it done. And so it just was one of those experiences that was the opposite of what I wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
But we got it done and I don't have to go back. So we're good.
Your reflection in chapter 3, many people wait for the perfect conditions to start. I mean, again, we've got to balance attention, whatever you want to talk about, because the perfect conditions are generally never going to be there. And you don't want to be stupid.
Right.
And go, with a Hail Mary when there's no wisdom in that. Again, I feel like we tend to polarize. We look at people and we have those who, because I've been the one that's caution to the wind. I don't care. Let's just go. And it was really an unwise decision. And over here, you got analysis paralysis that we talk about and whatnot, and waiting for the perfect conditions. There's got to be some, we're just talking about in the middle is wisdom and discernment. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me on this climb, what happened was I was like, okay, one, most of the details on the climb are in Russian and they're about impossible to find anything in English. And so my thought was, all right, we're not going to summit, but at least I'm going to learn what this mountain is about, what the true technicality of it is, what I really need. So when I come back, I'm going to have a better experience. I kind of was remembering Mount Logan, right? We had a terrible first experience. That experience taught me a whole bunch. I'll be able to go back and have a great second experience. So my expectations of the entire climb shifted at the airport. Yeah. Like whatever happens, happens, but here's what I'm hoping to happen. And that was something I could control. I could learn, here's how steep it is. Here's what kind of crampons I want. Here's what kind of backpack I want. Here's what kind of gloves I want to wear. Here's the layering that I want to use. So when I come back, it's going to be better. The fact that we got momentum and we're able to summit was like, okay, amazing. Not on the radar, didn't expect it, but glad it worked out. And now I don't need to come back, but I just changed the win so that I was winning along the way and not like reinforcing how frustrated I was and how angry I was about what was happening.
Well, you mentioned expectations. That's again, one of those, I think, as I look at goals overall, I don't want to, you want to be like you want to be committed and you want to be inspired with it. And yet you don't know, you can't control everything. And so I find myself just kind of stepping back and looking and going, what are my expectations here? What would happen? Worst case scenario, would that be okay? Is it worth the effort? Back to enjoying the process, I guess. And because if I just have my expectations set on perfect, then I am guaranteed to disappoint myself. But then I'm not going to polarize and go over here. And what's that, stupid statement? The secret to happiness is just lower your expectations. Yeah. I can't get out of bed then if I just got that. But it is that, I don't know, back to the emotions and whatnot. It's just, I guess, I don't know. It's just, it's holding the balance. Mm-hmm. How do you look at it with expectations?
Yeah, for me, it was very much, I love the feeling of winning. Like I really do. And so it was like, where can I find my wins and what can I accumulate there? And just start focusing on where I'm winning. And I was winning in little teeny tiny areas and those areas were enough momentum to keep going. Now, did I butt scoot down this mountain in Europe? Yeah, I did, because my boots were too big and I broke a toe slamming into the front of the boots. So was it an awesome exit? Absolutely not. But did we win? We won the game. So we're going to just focus on that, because what is the point in focusing on the other?
Your luggage. I will ask this. I had a kid 2 years ago. She went to France, lost her luggage, and it was like a month. The amount of time that we spent trying to track it down. And now today, nothing goes into the check-in without an Apple AirTag. Have you got
exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank God. I watch those things at the airport.
I do too. I'm like, okay, luggage is loaded. We're good.
Yeah. I'm going to scream if we're on the taxi and my luggage is not with me.
And I will bring my boots like on my carry-on from here on out. Like I always have my boots in my carry-on because, a lot of things you can rent, feet things are just not as easy. And so is it convenient? No. But when things go missing, you're like, thank goodness this worked out for me.
That is a good call on the shoes. Yeah. I am so tired of losing toenails.
Yes.
Yeah. Chapter 4, set yourself up for support. And you start off with recognize interdependence. And I want you to speak to that. We hear that it's not a very popular term or well-used term, interdependence. Now here on the show, we have multiple times, but we just recently had Terry Cole on the show talking about codependent. We know that term. And again, I didn't mean to come up with this, but I feel like you're bringing out these terms that I feel are polarized so often. And it's, I'm going to be independent. I don't need anybody. I am autonomous and self-sufficient. And over here, the majority of us end up being codependent to some degree. I don't think that we have a good understanding of interdependence. So how do you define it? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I really actually look for that in my relationships in my life. The mountains are an easy way to explain it because, for example, when we were doing Mount Logan, I'm 115 pounds. I'm 5'5". If I put a lot of weight on my frame, maybe I could get 10 pounds on my frame. So I'm 125, which means maybe I could carry 2 more pounds or 3 more pounds of weight up the mountain. It's not really going to get us a lot of bang for our buck. So when I'm trying to climb with somebody and we're doing an alpine push or a harder climb, they have to be 180 to 220 pound person that is strong and tall and can pull the weight, because I'm not going to be able to. And so I have a lower center of gravity. I can dig out holes. I can melt water. I can build tents. I can do those kinds of things. But no matter how much I try to improve my ability to carry weight, it's just not going to give us enough juice for the squeeze. And so for me, it's like, okay, here's what my partner needs to look like for our team to succeed to get to the top. And sometimes that's hard to hire because we like to hang out with people that are like us.
Yeah.
And if they're like us, they typically have the same skills as us. And so then we're both have blind spots in the same area that are not going to help us. And so I'm always looking at what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Not to judge myself or berate myself or feel not good enough, but to be, here's what I look like on paper. Who on paper is going to match me? That's going to fill in these blanks that are their strengths and my weaknesses and my strengths, their weaknesses, so that we can synergistically work together and get to the top of our goal or mountain or whatever we're pursuing.
It reminds me, I talk about this so often, Patrick Lencioni, such a well-known business guy, and he's got the Working Genius as his book and his profile that you can take. And it has 6 areas of working genius, and it'll give you, here's your top 2, here's your middle ones, your competencies. And the last one is you stink at these, or they really drain you, whatnot. And I don't know why it was that, because it's not a new concept, but I just didn't embrace it well. As an entrepreneur, you wear all the hats and you try to do everything and end up spending too much time working where you're incompetent, and even as a parent and whatnot, doing that. And looking at that it really helped me to say, look, this is where I shine. I want to work there, and I don't need to be wasting energy over here. Get other people to do it. Because prior to that, Jen, I did just what you talked about, and I would align with people who are like me, kindred spirits, and we're all dreamers, and we all ideate, and we all come up with something, and none of us are good at executing. We stink at finishing, and yada yada. And so back to the interdependence. And my first thought when you started talking is just, and as always, I'm talking to myself, is just be willing to admit my limitations. And that was hard. That was really hard to come to.
Oh, it's so hard at first, right? I mean, it's just not fun to focus on that. But when we change it to the words, and you said this a few seconds ago, what are my energy drainers? Right? So where am I getting energized and where am I getting drained? And I just need to manage my energy. So I need to cut all the drainers as much as possible. And so, for example, at my house, I don't like laundry. I'm kind of fussy. I don't like wrinkles in my clothes. I like everything to hang a certain way. I like things folded a certain way. That doesn't mean I'm good at it myself. And so I actually have a nanny. She finds peace in laundry. I couldn't be more grateful for that quality in her, because then when I'm throwing stuff into the laundry, I'm like, you know what? Karen actually likes to do this. This is okay. She finds peace here. And I don't. And so if you look at it from what is draining my energy, what is energizing me, then you're not beating yourself up as bad, because I don't like to admit I'm bad at things, even though I am.
Okay, let's play with that, because chapter 5, you have navigate the messy middle. And it was actually in your reflection on it, said identify your messy middle. And I was again kind of thinking about, well, to use the working genius, you've got these 2 areas that are your working genius. You really shine, you flourish, you're in flow, let's say. Then you've got the last 2 that you're pretty incompetent in. It's not. But in the middle, here's some that you can do it. It drains you And that's where you got me thinking about there. That's probably my messy middle that, okay, I'm going to have to participate here somewhat. I can't totally divest myself, but it is draining. I can get frustrated. I think I probably am inefficient, whatnot. And just being clear on that, I am much more communicative with other people. Say, okay, here's this thing we're going to do. Okay, let's just get it out on the table. Kind of back to the weaknesses or the struggles. This is honest about me. This is my messy middle. I probably don't do a good enough job asking other people what theirs are.
Yeah. I like to rush the turn. If you go skiing downhill, you have this spot on every turn that you're facing straight downhill. And then you curve around and you cut the speed, and then you curve around and cut the speed. That straight down the hill feeling is very unsettling for me. And so I have a tendency to rush through that spot instead of flow through that spot. When I'm building we just did this the other day in social media, actually. We changed one of our strategies. And so they told us, when you change this strategy, the algorithm doesn't know you anymore. And everything's going to go backwards and feel like you're not gaining traction and blah, 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 blah. But then it's going to learn your system and it's going to be like, oh, this is what she does. And then you're going to start having a boost again and things are going to go okay. Well, that time frame from when you said, yes, let's do something different till you see the results of the something different that you did, that's the messy middle. That's the one where you're like, okay, is this really working? Are you sure? Maybe I'm an exception. I don't know, blah, 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 blah. But that messy middle, when you label it and say, oh, this is what I'm in. This is not forever. This is expected. This is normal. Just keep doing the next thing and you'll get through it. That helps me because there's messy middles in everything we pursue. And when you're in it, sometimes it can feel like quicksand that you're never going to get out of. But that's not the case. So for me, I label it because it helps me understand here's where I'm at. And this is part of the process. I can't get through this without experiencing it.
I just like the terminology. It just, I don't know, for some reason it struck well for me. I also hear you on skiing. I live out here in Colorado. When we ski, it's one of those things that I realize I'm just going to let it be fun, like art. Doesn't mean I'm good at it. I'm just
I know, because I can get so serious about it. I'm like, left foot, right foot, big toe, little toe, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wait, I'm not even having fun anymore. I'm analyzing every single time I go down a turn.
And if I am having fun, I'm really not that impressive. I'm just kind of a mediocre skier. So
yeah, totally.
So be it. Chapter 6, recognize when it isn't your mountain. Yeah. That is still one that's still a struggle for me. When you've got that thing that you set out to do, and then it came up recently in a show that we did, and we're talking about goals. And I realized that, I've had this on my goal sheet, my annual goal sheet this is the 4th year in a row. I'm writing it down. I haven't done it. Maybe this is not my mountain. And on one hand, I want to be optimistic and say that's freeing, because to some degree it is. It's also a little sad. Usually I think I hold both of those in there. It's kind of freeing, but it can be a little lament with it to recognize that it's not your mountain. What's your example though for you on that chapter?
So I went on a friend's private plane. Her husband had a work meeting, so we flew in on the plane, went shopping for the day, came home, and we were able to pick up our kids before school was out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to get my pilot's license. Yeah. Like, what a dream. And so here I am, thinking of the Beach Boys and getting my pilot's license and going on vacation with my family and blah, 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 blah. So I call the local aviation center. I'm like, hey, I want to take lessons. I start taking lessons. I'm like, this really isn't as sexy as I thought it was going to be. And you have all these run-ups and you have all these rundowns and all the little details. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take 2 of my kids with us on one of these test flights. So I take my 2 kids with me. They're fighting. They wonder why they don't have a TV. They have to go to the bathroom. They don't care that they can see our house. All my idea of what this was going to be compared to the reality of what it was couldn't be farther from each other. And in fact, the more I got into it, the more I realized I'm not going to fly my family around and kill us all. There's a lot that goes into this. And so I did the course until it was time to take the final thing. And I realized if I took the final thing, my insurance would go up, all these things would happen for something that I didn't even really want to execute. I just didn't want to not do something I said I was going to do. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to not do something I said I was going to do because it doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't make emotional sense. It doesn't make sense. And so I gave myself permission to be like, I took this to the end. I know it is not my personality or what I thought it was going to be, and I'm okay walking away from it.
Do you deal with shoulds in there a lot? Because I'm thinking about it for myself, and I think I have a lot of shoulds in those, that it should be my mountain. I told my kids, I don't know, 5 years ago, I said, you know what? I think I want to go after a national championship in my age category, for cycling again. I think I was an inspired moment. And later on, I realized it makes sense. I should have the ability and the capacity and the capability. It would be cool. But I really don't want to. I really don't want to devote myself to that much training, because then I'll realize, like a day today, and realize I just want to go run. I don't even want to ride. I want to do something different. And I love that. Right. I don't want to, but it was a should. So I wonder if a lot of times I don't know. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I think a should is a trigger word. Like a should is like, oh, wait. Does that mean I really want to, or is that my like clue to myself that, hey, this isn't something I want to do? And just learning your own cues are so important. Yeah. So for me, for example, when I start getting overwhelmed, I realize I'm not creative anymore. If I haven't had a creative thought in a little bit of time, that means my life is too busy, too scheduled, and I need to start looking at things. And so for you, it could be when those should show up. Oh, wait, maybe that's a cue. That's something that you don't really want to do. And the should is giving you that flexibility to evaluate it.
It is good. I like the terminology. Maybe that's not my mountain too. It's relevant as I'm surrounded by mountains, but there's so many opportunities and things to do, and so many people I'm involved with. And I got to step back and go, do I really want to do that? Or is it a should? The last one we'll just anchor the show with, and we talked about it already, but I'm going to ask you to hit it again, to understand chapter 7, understand the goal is not the goal. And that is that is counterintuitive. And I think we can hear that and go, what? The goal is not the goal. So give me your heart in that.
Yeah. So when I set out this goal to be the first woman to climb the 7-second summits, like that was the goal. But then I realized I was like, it doesn't even matter if I do these things or not. But in the pursuit of this, who do I get to impact? What do I get to learn about myself? What experiences do I get to have that I'll cherish for the rest of my life? So that goal is that North Star that gives you direction and allows you to say yes or no to things, because it'll bring you closer or farther away from that pursuit. Yeah. But it's truly the journey that unfolds, the people that you meet, the experiences that you get to have, the stories that you get left with to be able to share with others. That's the win. And so I think a lot of times we have this goal of whatever it is, hold on to that, but not so tight that you miss the experience of achieving it.
Great. Thank you. You know, it's interesting, 7-second summits. I related to it right away. So I'm out here in Colorado, land of the 14ers, and more and more, I've got a guys group. We do a lot of stuff. More and more, we do 13ers. There's nobody there. They're crowded. They're more remote and sometimes more extreme. And the last one that we did, we went to do 3 in a row. I can't remember what the name was. We were going to do the set of 3. And we got up to almost the first one, and the weather was just complete crap. And I got totally teased because I was way underprepared. I was just ready for a speed hike, and I did not have the right stuff. So anyways, we turned back around, went down, and we ended up 5 hours around the fire pit having a conversation that the guys talk about till this day.
That's so awesome.
It's so awesome. So it lines up with that. Hey, just thanks. It's so fun. I related I haven't done the mountains like you have. I do mountains a lot, but I just related so much as an athlete and love the analogies. And you just brought me back to the things I needed to remind myself of. And I think that's what people will find as they go through the book and go through your stories and the real life lessons ultimately. I think it was David Meltzer, who I had on the show, and he talked about that. I'll never forget, but that we do things over and over, make these mistakes. At some point, we got to realize if we keep making the same mistake, we haven't learned the lesson. And so, thanks for sharing your lessons with us. Thanks for being here, Jenn.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. Again, that is Jenn Drummond, Jenn. Type that in. You'll find her everywhere. She's got a very active Instagram page and whatnot. Her podcast you can find right now that you may find me on, depending on when it publishes, as well as a guest, is Seek Your Next Summit. Seek Your Next Summit. You can find that wherever you're listening to your podcast now. And her book that I used as somewhat of the muse for our conversation is called Break Proof: 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Goals. Got a question for Jenn, for myself? Just go to kevinmiller.co. Let me know. Be happy to connect with you. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all, enjoy your ride.
Yeah.